Let's move to video 3 of 3 for paired sample t-test. So after the first table, a descriptive statistic table, we go to the second table, which is paired samples correlations. So basically, there's no significant correlation between the perception before the experiment and after the experiment. You can see the significant value, p-value is 0.667. And similarly, there is no significant correlation between the amount of time participants spent on extensive reading before and after the experiment, because p-value is greater than 5%. The most important table in our research is the last one, is paired samples test table. As you can see here, the mean difference for the perception before the experiment and after experiment is minus 1.49, meaning that if you look at the mean here, meaning that there is a dramatic change in the perception of the subjects of the extent in their perception of the extensive reading. They change from being negative about extensive reading to being rather positive. More encouragingly, now people practice extensive reading a lot, because there's a big difference between the average hour they devote to extensive reading per week. Last time they devoted 1.02 hours per week, and right now, after the intervention, they devote 3.48 hours per week to extensive reading. So this is a big difference. And again, wait until we look at the p-value. You can see the p-value for the first pair is 0.000. It simply means p-value is less than 5%. So we conclude that there is a significant difference in perception of the participants before the intervention and after the intervention. There is a significant difference. And the p-value for the second pair is very, very significant. P is 0.000, so it's less than 5%. So we can conclude that there is a big difference. There is a positive shift in the amount of time people devote to extensive reading. The practice of extensive reading is a dramatic improvement right now. In other words, there's a big improvement in the way people practice extensive reading. So how are you going to display the data in your final report? And how are you going to construct a paragraph or two that communicate your final results to the audience? Let's go to it right now. So I have prepared the table here, and this is the table number. This is the table title. Comparing participant perception of extensive reading and time spent on extensive reading before and after the intervention, and the sample size is 25. And the variable in our study, there are two variables: perception of extensive reading and time spent on extensive reading. And perception of extensive reading is split into two: perception of extensive reading before the experiment and perception after the experiment. And time spent on extensive reading is split into two: time spent on extensive reading before the experiment and time spent on extensive reading after the experiment. And you can see the mean perception. Okay, the mean score perception is here, and the standard deviation, and the time spent on extensive reading before and after the mean hours are presented here, and the standard deviations are presented here, and the t value for the perception, degree of freedom, and the p value and the effect size d, and this is the same, the t value, degree of freedom, p value, and the effect size d for the second variable, which is time spent on extensive reading. So that's how we display the data in our final report. And I think it's a good practice to provide the notes. For example, here, a rating scale for perception of extensive reading, 1 equals strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. And rating scale for time on extensive reading measured, okay, it is measured in hours they spend on extensive reading per week. So how do you compute the effect size d for the paired sample t-test? Okay, the formula is very, very easy. In order to compute effect size d, it is very simple. Let's go back to our SPAS data here. So in order to compute effect size d for each pair, it's very easy. So we need to divide the mean, okay, the mean of the pairs differences here, the mean of the pair differences by its standard deviation of the pair differences. So here, 1.49333 divided by 0.57025. You're gonna see the D, okay, the effect size for the first pair. Similarly, you divide the mean of pair differences, in this case, 2.46 divided by the standard deviation for the pair differences here, 1.45717. That's how we compute it. So now it's time for report writing, ladies and gentlemen, and submit our final result here. I prepared for you here. Let's allow me to read. To investigate the impacts of the intervention that aims to change the subject's perception of extensive reading and the practice of extensive reading, a paired or correlated samples t-test was employed. There was a positive change in the perception of the subjects of extensive reading. T 24 equal minus 13.09, P equals 0.001, D equals 2.62. The mean score after the intervention, mean equals 3.73, standard deviation equal 0.37 is higher than the mean score before the intervention. Mean equals 2.24, standard deviation equal 0.47. The change is extremely large, D equals 2.62. Equally encouraging, the subjects reported spending more hours on extensive reading after the intervention. T 24 equals minus 8.44, P equals 0.001, D equals 1.69. The mean difference is huge at 2.46 hours per week. Again, the change is extremely large. D equals 1.69, full stop. So this is how we construct, a report for our paired sample t-test. So before I conclude this chapter, I want you to draw your attention to how to interpret the effect size D. You still remember from the previous movie on independent sample t-test. If you need to refresh your understanding of how to interpret it, please refer to our movies on independent sample t-test.